The audition hall was already full when Eli and his mother stepped inside. The place felt far bigger than anything Eli had ever seen. Rows of chairs stretched across the room, filled with parents whispering to their children, fixing collars and brushing hair, as if every small thing mattered. The long polished floor seemed to shine under the bright ceiling lights, and at the far end stood a grand piano that looked almost too perfect to touch. Eli held his mother's hand tightly. He wasn't scared, not exactly. It was more like his chest felt too small for his heartbeat. Every sound around him felt louder than it should: the soft coughs, the rustling papers, the tapping heels of nervous students. His mother leaned down and whispered, "You're doing fine, sweetheart. Just breathe." He nodded but didn't speak. Talking felt impossible right then. He had practiced for this moment for months, staying up late after his mother fell asleep, working on the small keyboard they had saved from a thrift shop. The keys stuck sometimes, especially the C-sharp in the upper octave, but he had managed to work around it. This audition, though this was on a real piano, a grand one, probably worth more than he could ever imagine. People around them kept glancing at the stage where a group of judges sat behind a long table, covered in papers and water bottles. At the center sat the director of the academy, a man known for his strict standards and even stricter face. Everyone called him Mr. Hanley. He had a sharp jawline, narrow eyes that missed nothing, and a habit of adjusting his glasses every few seconds. He didn't smile. Not once. Eli watched him for a while and wondered if anyone had ever heard him laugh. Auditions were already going on. A girl no older than 10 stepped up to the piano and played a short piece with shaking hands. She made a small mistake halfway through, and Eli saw the director's eyebrow twitch. The girl's mother gasped under her breath, as if the world had just ended. When the girl finished, one of the judges clapped politely, but the director only nodded and wrote something on a sheet. The girl hurried off stage, head down. Eli swallowed hard. He wasn't dressed like the other kids. Many of them wore neat coats, shiny shoes, or dresses that looked fresh out of a boutique. Eli wore a simple shirt, a bit old at the sleeves, but still clean. His mother had ironed it early that morning. She told him he looked perfect, but he could tell she was nervous too. She kept rubbing the strap of her bag, twisting it like she was trying to calm her thoughts. A woman at the registration desk called out the next number. A taller boy stepped forward, confident, his chin lifted as though the stage belonged to him. His father walked behind him with pride in every step. "Why don't we sit for a moment?" his mother suggested. They sat in 2 empty chairs near the back. A young boy in front of them hummed scales under his breath while his mother tapped out rhythms on her knee. Across the room, a girl practiced finger positions in the air, her hands dancing silently. Eli kept his eyes on the piano. He wasn't used to big crowds or fancy places. His world normally revolved around his small room, his keyboard, and the steady sound of his mother preparing meals or calling him to help with chores. But music was different. It didn't matter where he was. The moment his fingers touched the keys, he felt like the world around him softened. He knew he wasn't supposed to dream too big. His mother always supported him, but she also reminded him to be practical. Still, this audition felt like his one chance to step into a world he had only read about. Sudden burst of laughter came from the judge's table. Eli looked up and saw Mr. Hanley speaking with another judge, shaking his head. He wondered what they were laughing at, but he tried not to think about it. A voice called a new number. Eli checked the slip in his hand. His number was coming soon. Very soon. His stomach tightened. A boy with bright shoes went up next. He played fast, really fast, his fingers moving like he wanted to show off more than express anything. When he finished, some people in the room clapped quietly, but the director didn't look impressed. He gave a polite nod and scribbled another note. Eli's mother leaned closer. Remember what we talked about. Play with your heart. You always do. He nodded lightly. He didn't trust his voice not to shake. More names were called, one after another. Some students looked relieved when they walked off stage. Others looked ready to cry. One boy dropped his sheet music on the floor, and a judge had to help him pick it up. Slowly, the hall began to feel warmer. Maybe it was the number of people. Maybe it was the pressure building with each performance. Eli rubbed his palms against his pants to keep them dry. Finally, a woman approached the center of the room with a clipboard and said, "Next, audition number 43. Eli looked down. That was him. His mother squeezed his shoulder. "Go on, I'll be right here." He stood up, legs heavier than they should be. Every step toward the stage sounded too loud, even though the room was filled with soft murmurs. His hands trembled slightly, and he tried to hide it by keeping them close to his sides. The director looked up, noticing Eli's small frame and simple clothes. There was a spark of curiosity mixed with something else, maybe doubt. One of the judges asked, "Name?" "Eli," he said quietly. "And what will you be playing today?" He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, one of the judges pointed to the accompanist and asked, "Do you need someone to play along with you? A backing track? Sheet music for the pianist?" Eli shook his head. "No, I'll play alone." The director raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" He repeated, sounding amused. Eli nodded again. A small laugh came from one of the judges, but the director leaned back in his chair. "Well then," he said, half joking, "if he plays the piano, I'll kneel right here." His words floated through the hall, loud enough for several parents to hear. A few chuckled quietly. Eli felt a flush rise in his cheeks. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at the judges. Instead, he focused on the piano. The grand piano stood waiting in the center of the stage, smooth and shiny, with the lid lifted just enough to show the strings inside. The bench looked soft and luxurious compared to the hard wooden stool he practiced on at home. Eli walked toward it slowly. He reminded himself to breathe. His heart was still racing, but he told himself that the piano didn't care whether he felt scared or confident. It would respond the same way no matter who touched it. He reached the bench, pulled it out gently, and sat down. The seat felt different, stable, solid. He placed his hands on his knees for a moment, grounding himself. All around him, the room quieted. He lifted his hands and hovered them over the keys. For a moment, everything else faded away, the rustling papers, the whispers, the director's doubtful remark. All he could see was the smooth row of keys stretching in front of him. He took one deep breath, then another. He placed his fingers on the keys and closed his eyes, letting the first memory of the song come back to him, the piece he had practiced over and over until his hands knew it better than his mind did. He didn't worry about impressing the judges. He didn't worry about the director's laugh. He just wanted to play. The room waited. And in that quiet moment, Eli began to press the first soft note, hoping that what came next would speak louder than anything he could ever say with words. Eli's fingers trembled after the first note, not because he doubted the song, but because he could feel dozens of eyes staring at his back. The room felt heavier now, as if every person inside was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. He kept his eyes closed a moment longer, letting the weight settle before lifting his fingers again. He wasn't thinking about impressing anyone. He wasn't thinking about the director or the judges or the parents who had chuckled at the remark made earlier. He was thinking only about the music he had learned in quiet moments at home, sometimes with the soft hum of the refrigerator behind him, sometimes with the gentle sound of his mother's breathing from the next room. Music had always been a place where he felt safe. He pressed the second note, then the third, forming the opening line he knew by heart. The sound of the grand piano surprised him. It was richer, deeper, and far clearer than the small keyboard he had practiced on. Even the softest touch seemed to carry across the room, filling the space in a way he had never experienced before. For a few seconds, he felt almost frightened by how powerful it sounded. But the feeling passed quickly, washed away by the realization that this new sound only made the music stronger. He let his fingers move into the next part, gently at first, then with growing confidence. The melody began to flow, each note connecting to the next, like a story being told without words. At the judge's table, the director had stopped writing. His pen rested on the paper, frozen in place. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with irritation, but with curiosity. The amused expression he had worn earlier faded as he leaned forward in his chair. Some parents shifted in their seats, sitting up straighter. A few children, who had been playing quietly with their hands or humming to themselves, turned their heads toward the stage. Eli didn't notice any of this. His eyes were still half closed, and his breathing had steadied. He felt as though the room around him had disappeared, leaving only the piano and the music that moved through him like a familiar whisper. The melody deepened, sliding into a warm, emotional section he always loved playing. He softened his touch, letting the sound stretch into the air like a long exhale. The piano responded beautifully, as if every part of it had been waiting for someone to treat it gently. Eli leaned into the music now. His fingers followed patterns he had practiced so often that they no longer needed direction. They simply moved, guided by instinct rather than thought. The gentle rise and fall of the notes brought him comfort, the same way it did late at night when he played quietly so he wouldn't wake his mother. At the back of the hall, his mother watched him with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had seen him play many times, but never on an instrument like this, and never in front of so many people. She could see the tiny shake in his shoulders from nerves, but she also saw the calm settle over him as the music took over. She whispered to herself, "You've got this." On stage, Eli shifted into the next section faster, more complicated. With little jumps and turns, his hands had learned only after many mistakes. At home, he had struggled with this part the most. The sticking keys on his old keyboard sometimes threw him off, forcing him to adjust on the spot. But that practice turned out to be a blessing. It taught him to recover quickly, to keep the music flowing, even when something didn't go as planned. Now, on the grand piano, the notes came easily. His fingers moved smoothly, almost dancing across the keys. For the first time in his life, Eli understood what it meant to feel like the piano itself was helping him. The audience stayed quiet. Not a cough, not a whisper. Even the judges sat, without blinking. The accompanist, who usually looked bored during long auditions, had stopped tapping his foot and now watched Eli with a faint smile. He mouthed something quietly, maybe "wow," maybe "unbelievable." But Eli heard nothing except the music. He reached the heart of the piece now, a section filled with emotion, where the melody dipped low and rose high in gentle waves. It wasn't a show-off moment. It wasn't loud or fast. It was soft, honest, almost fragile. It required heart more than skill. Eli took a deep breath and let the emotion guide him. His hands slowed, pressing the keys with such care that the notes sounded like whispers. Each one hung in the air, delicate but steady. Some parents in the audience leaned back as if they were afraid even the slightest movement might break the moment. One mother covered her mouth, eyes softening. A boy who had played earlier stared at the stage with wide eyes, looking almost confused by how someone so quiet could play with such confidence. At the judge's table, the director's expression had completely changed. His usual stern look had melted into something more serious, focused, almost intense. He exchanged a glance with one of the judges, who raised their eyebrows in disbelief. The director lifted his pen again, but didn't write. Instead, he held it loosely between his fingers, as if afraid that the sound of it touching the paper might interrupt the performance. One soft note followed another until Eli reached the transition into the final part of the song. This section required both strength and grace. It was the part he practiced most because he wanted it to sound just right. It wasn't meant to be loud or dramatic, but it needed to feel complete, like the ending of a chapter that left the listener both satisfied and wanting more. He straightened slightly, letting his shoulders relax, and allowed the rhythm to guide him. His hands moved with purpose, weaving together the final phrases in a slow, rising pattern. The room felt warmer again, but not because of nerves. It felt warm in the way quiet moments sometimes do, soft, comfortable, almost peaceful. Eli moved through the final measures with steady breath. He pressed the last chord gently, holding it for just a moment before releasing it with care, letting the final note fade naturally into silence. For several seconds, no one moved. Eli lowered his hands and rested them on his lap. His breathing was slightly quicker now, a mix of nerves and relief. He wasn't sure if he had played perfectly. Maybe he had made small mistakes he hadn't noticed. Maybe he had rushed somewhere or missed a detail, but he knew one thing. He had played with all his heart. He finally opened his eyes. The room seemed brighter somehow. The silence felt heavy, but not uncomfortable, more like everyone was gathering their thoughts. The director was the first to respond. He blinked, sat back slowly, and let out a long, quiet breath he didn't seem to realize he'd been holding. His pen slipped from his fingers and landed softly on the table. One of the judges whispered, "Incredible." Another nodded, still staring at the piano. Then, almost cautiously, a parent in the back started clapping. Another joined, and then another. Within seconds, the room filled with soft applause, not loud or wild, but meaningful, warm. Eli looked out at the sea of faces, surprised by the gentle smiles, the nods, the eyes that looked softer now than they had earlier. He didn't know where to look. His cheeks warmed, and he lowered his gaze to the keys again. The director cleared his throat. The applause faded almost instantly. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. His steps were steady as he walked around the judges' table, moving toward the center of the hall. People watched him closely. Unsure of what he planned to do, Eli stayed seated, unsure whether to stand or wait. The director stopped a few feet from the stage. For a moment, he looked up at Eli quietly, his expression unreadable. Then, without saying a word, he lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps filled the room. A few people covered their mouths. Even the accompanist froze in disbelief. Eli stared at the director, confused and unsure how to react. The director finally spoke, voice softer than anyone had ever heard from him. "I think I owe you an apology." The room stayed silent. He continued, "And perhaps a chance. A real one." Eli blinked, unsure whether he had heard correctly. The director rose again, brushed off his coat, and stepped closer. "Where?" he asked quietly. "Did you learn to play like that?" The question hung in the air, waiting for an answer. Eli didn't know what to say yet. He didn't know how to explain the late nights, the old keyboard, the moments he practiced in the dark so he wouldn't wake his mother. He didn't know how to explain that the music came from a place inside him that didn't have words. But he would explain soon. For now, the room watched him, waiting, hoping to hear the story behind the music that had just filled the hall. For a long moment, Eli sat on the piano bench, unsure of what to do or say. The room was still filled with quiet surprise. The director's unusual gesture had left everyone speechless. Even Eli's mother, sitting at the back of the hall, held a hand over her chest, trying to process what she had just seen. Eli looked at the director, his eyes wide, He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He wasn't used to adults, especially ones with important jobs, looking at him like he was someone special. All he had done was play the song he loved. He didn't expect it to change the whole room. The director waited patiently, as if he understood that rushing Eli would only make him more nervous. The hall remained silent, the kind of silence that felt full rather than empty. After a moment, Eli stood up from the bench. His legs were shaky, but he managed to keep his posture steady. He wasn't sure whether he should step closer to the director or stay where he was. Instead, he stayed near the piano, placing one hand gently on the side of the instrument. "I learned at home," Eli finally said, his voice soft. The director tilted his head. "At home, with no teacher?" Eli nodded. "Yes." One of the judges leaned forward, curiosity growing. Another whispered something to the person beside them, but the director kept his attention on Eli. "You play like someone who has studied for years," the director said. "Who taught you?" "Myself," Eli replied. A small stir moved through the audience. Some parents exchanged surprised glances. A few children sat up straighter. The accompanist, who had been quietly observing the scene, raised his eyebrows. The director frowned, not in anger, but in disbelief. "You taught yourself?" "Yes, sir," Eli said. "We don't have much. I have a small keyboard at home. It's old, but it works enough for me to practice." His voice was steady, but his words carried honesty that made the room grow even quieter. The director took a slow breath. He didn't expect this answer. He looked at the judges, then back at the boy in front of him. "How long have you been playing?" Eli hesitated. "Since I was 7? And you've never had lessons? Not even once?" He shook his head. The director folded his arms, deep in thought. He wasn't a man who allowed himself to be easily impressed. For years, he had watched students with private tutors, students with expensive training, students who traveled across cities for lessons. But here stood a boy who had none of that yet, played with more emotion than most students who had every advantage. "What made you want to play?" The director asked gently. Eli looked down at the piano keys. He touched one lightly. It made a soft sound that echoed in the quiet room. "When I was little," he said, "my mother worked long hours. Sometimes she was really tired when she came home. I liked to play little tunes on my keyboard to make her smile. I didn't know how to read music then, so I just listened to songs and tried to copy them." His mother covered her mouth again, tears forming in her eyes. Eli continued. "Later, I found videos online. I watched people playing and slowed them down. I tried to follow their hands. It wasn't easy. Some of the keys on our keyboard stick, so I had to press harder or skip some notes." The director blinked, impressed. "And the piece you played today, where did you learn it?" "I listened to a recording," Eli said. "Many times. I practiced until I could play it without looking." A wave of admiration rippled through the hall. This wasn't something most children could do. This wasn't something many adults could do either. The director stepped closer, his expression softening. "Do you know what you did today?" Eli shook his head. "You moved this entire room," the director said quietly. "Not with fancy tricks or speed, but with feeling. That is something no one can teach. It comes from inside." Eli shifted his weight nervously, unsure how to respond. He didn't know how to accept praise, especially from someone so important. The director looked at the judges again. They exchanged nods, silent approval passing between them. He turned back to Eli. "Would you play something else for us?" The room buzzed softly. "Another song? Another performance?" Most auditions allowed only one piece. But this request wasn't part of the usual rules. It was personal. Eli glanced toward his mother. She gave him an encouraging nod. He turned back to the piano. I can try, he said. Play anything you like, the director said. Whatever feels right. Eli sat down again. He took a moment to breathe. His hands hovered over the keys before settling into the starting position for a melody he often played at home, a simple tune he had made up for his mother on a quiet evening. Something peaceful and light. The first notes floated out softly. This melody wasn't complicated. It wasn't flashy. It was gentle, warm, like a slow walk on a calm day. The room grew still again. This time, Eli didn't feel nervous. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply sharing something that felt honest. His fingers moved gracefully, letting the melody unfold naturally. A sense of calm spread across the hall. Even the director's tense posture relaxed. One of the judges closed their eyes, listening deeply. Eli's mother had tears running down her cheeks now. She wiped them away quietly so she wouldn't distract him. The melody rose and fell in soft waves. Eli played it as he always did, slowly, gently, and with his whole heart. When he finished, the final note hung in the air before fading into silence. This time, the applause came sooner. Still soft, still respectful, but fuller than before. There was warmth in it, genuine appreciation. Eli stepped back from the piano. He wasn't sure whether to bow or simply stand still. He did a small nod, and the audience smiled. The director walked closer to the stage again. "Eli," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "your talent is rare. Very rare." Eli felt his face grow warm. He didn't know what to say. The director continued, "Music like yours. It doesn't come from expensive schools or special training. It comes from the heart. And you have that." Eli blinked, trying to understand where this was going. The director then turned to the judges. "We need to discuss something." He walked back to the table, and the judges leaned in. They whispered among themselves, flipping through papers and gesturing toward the stage. The conversation grew more serious, more focused. Eli watched quietly, anxiety creeping back in. He didn't know what they were talking about. Was he in trouble for playing a second song? Were they arguing about whether he had followed the rules? His mother noticed his worried expression and called softly from the back, "It's okay. Just wait." The director finally straightened up and faced the hall. The room quieted instantly. "We have made a decision," he announced. Eli's heart thumped. The director looked straight at him. His expression was serious but gentle. "Eli, would you please come forward?" Eli stepped down from the stage, his hands trembling again, and walked toward the judge's table. The director met him halfway. "Eli," he said, "your playing shows incredible natural ability. With guidance and proper training, you could become something truly remarkable." Eli swallowed nervously. "Thank you, sir." The director nodded. "We would like to offer you a place in our academy." Gasps echoed through the room. A few children stared in disbelief. Some parents whispered with surprise. Being offered a spot immediately, without waiting for the end of auditions, was almost unheard of. Eli stared at the director. "A place?" "Yes," the director said. "A full scholarship. You will not have to pay anything." Eli's breath caught. His eyes widened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. The director continued, "We believe talent like yours should never be held back because of circumstances. You deserve a chance to grow, and we want to give you that chance." Eli's mother stood up from her seat, tears streaming freely now. She pressed a hand against her mouth, overwhelmed. Eli felt his own eyes burn. He looked down, trying to steady himself. "Do you accept?" The director asked softly. Eli nodded slowly, then more confidently. Yes, I do." A warm smile finally appeared on the director's face, the kind of smile that rarely appeared, the kind that meant something. "Welcome to the academy," he said. The room filled with applause, louder than before, but still respectful. Eli felt a strange mix of disbelief and joy. He looked toward his mother. She rushed toward him, her arms open, and pulled him into a gentle hug. She whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Eli hugged her back tightly. His heart felt full in a way he had never felt before. The director stepped aside, giving them a moment. Even some of the judges smiled warmly. Eli didn't know what would come next. New challenges, new lessons, a whole new world he had never imagined. But in that moment, as the applause washed over him, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope, a bright, comforting hope that made his next steps feel possible. And this was only the beginning. Eli walked out of the audition hall with his mother beside him, but it felt as though he were floating instead of stepping across the floor. The sounds of the room, the applause, the director's words, they all echoed in his mind like a dream he hadn't fully woken from. His mother's hand was warm on his shoulder, but he could sense she was still trying to steady her own emotions. Her eyes had a tired kind of happiness in them, the kind he had seen only a few times in his life. They stepped outside into the late afternoon air. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange, and the warmth of the sun touched Eli's face. People were still leaving the building behind them, some talking quietly about what they had witnessed inside. A few even looked at Eli with small smiles or curious glances. Whispering to one another, his mother let out a shaky breath. "I still can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Eli didn't know what to say. Part of him felt excited, so excited that his stomach felt like it was fluttering. But another part of him was overwhelmed. Everything had happened so fast. One moment he had been scared to even touch the piano, and the next he was being offered a scholarship to one of the best academies in the city. "I hope I didn't do anything wrong," he finally said. His mother stared at him. "Wrong, Eli? You played beautifully." He kicked a small pebble on the sidewalk. I didn't think something like this could happen." His mother placed both hands on his shoulders, guiding him to face her. "Listen to me. You earned this. You didn't make anything up. You didn't pretend to be someone else. You just played from your heart. That's what moved everyone." He nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but grateful for her words. They began walking toward the bus stop. The city felt different today, more alive, more welcoming. The sounds of cars and distant chatter blended with the soft breeze. Eli thought about the grand piano, about how it felt under his fingers, how it sounded like it belonged to a different world. "Do you think I can really keep up with everyone there?" he asked quietly. His mother gave a soft laugh. "If today showed anything, it's that you can do more than keep up." They arrived at the bus stop, and Eli sat on the bench, leaning back as he let everything settle. The bus wasn't coming yet, so they had a few quiet minutes. His mother reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle of water, handing it to him. "You must be thirsty," she said. He opened the bottle and took a sip. The cool water helped calm his thoughts a little. After a few minutes, the bus arrived with a gentle rumble. They boarded, and Eli chose a seat by the window. His mother sat beside him, smiling softly as she watched him gaze outside. During the ride home, Eli replayed the performance in his head, the first note, the soft parts, the moments when he let the feelings guide him more than the keys. He remembered the look on the director's face, the shock that slowly turned into admiration. He remembered the warmth of the applause, the kindness in the eyes of the people who had clapped. He touched his fingers together, imagining the keys beneath them. When they reached their stop, they stepped off the bus and began the short walk to their apartment. Their neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. Small stores lined the street, and a few people greeted them with friendly nods. The sun was beginning to set behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the pavement. As they reached the front door of their building, Eli's mother paused. "Are you ready for everything that's coming?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "I think so." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll figure it out together." Inside their apartment, the air smelled faintly of dinner leftovers. Their living room was small but cozy, with second-hand furniture arranged neatly. In the corner sat Eli's keyboard, the old one with missing paint on the edges and a few keys that didn't work properly. Eli looked at it with a mixture of affection and embarrassment. Compared to the grand piano he had played earlier, this keyboard felt like a toy. But it was all they had, and it had carried him this far. His mother sat down on the worn couch. "Do you want to rest? You've had a long day." Eli shook his head. "I want to practice." She smiled softly. "Of course you do." He walked to the keyboard, plugged it in, and sat on the small wooden stool. The metal legs creaked slightly under him. He placed his hands on the keys and took a breath. When he played the first chord, the sound felt thin and uneven compared to the grand piano's full voice. But he didn't let that discourage him. He kept playing, letting the melody fall naturally from his hands. His mother listened quietly from the couch. Her eyes softened again as she watched her son pour his heart into the instrument. She had always known he had a gift, but seeing him recognized for it, really recognized, felt like a miracle. After a few minutes, Eli paused and looked at her. "Do you really think I belong at that academy?" "Without a doubt," she said. "But the other students, they probably know so much more than I do." "Maybe," she admitted. "But talent is more than knowledge. You have something they can't learn from books." He didn't reply. Instead, he turned back to the keyboard, practicing the same melody again and again, each time adjusting his touch, trying to chase the feeling he had found on the grand piano. Later that evening, after dinner, there was a knock on the door. Eli's mother wiped her hands on a towel and opened it. Standing there was one of their neighbors, a friendly older woman named Mrs. Glenn. She lived down the hall and often baked small treats for the children in the building. "I heard the news," she said brightly. "Someone told me your boy played at the academy today." Eli peeked from behind his mother. Mrs. Glenn smiled warmly at him. "You must be so proud, dear." Eli's mother nodded, trying not to look emotional again. "I am, very much." "Well," the neighbor said, "I just wanted to say congratulations. We all knew he had something special." She looked at Eli. "You might make our whole building famous one day." Eli blushed. "Thank you." She waved and walked back to her apartment. His mother closed the door and turned to him. "See? People believe in you." He gave a small smile. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Eli practiced until his fingers felt tired. His mother prepared for work the next day, folding her clothes and packing her bag. Every so often she glanced at him, as though trying to memorize this moment. Before bedtime, she sat next to him and smoothed his hair. "Tomorrow, we'll go to the academy together. They'll tell us what we need to do next. What if it's too much?" he asked softly. "Then we'll take it step by step," she replied. "Big things are just small things stacked together. You've already done something huge without even realizing it." Eli leaned against her, and she wrapped an arm around him. That night, after he fell asleep, his mother stayed awake for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about their struggles, the sacrifices she had made, the nights she wondered how she would keep them afloat. Seeing Eli achieve something so bright felt like a new beginning, not just for him, but for both of them. She walked quietly to the keyboard, touching one of the keys lightly. It offered a soft, uneven note in return. She smiled, imagining her son on a real stage one day, playing for audiences who would feel the same emotion the room had felt earlier. The next morning came slowly. Light crept through the thin curtains, warming the room. Eli woke up to the familiar sounds of his mother preparing breakfast. The smell of toast filled the air. He got dressed and joined her at the small table. "You slept well?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "Ready?" He nodded. After breakfast, they left the apartment and took the bus to the academy. The building looked even bigger in the morning light. Students walked in with instruments and music folders. Some seemed confident, others nervous. Eli held his mother's hand a little tighter. Inside, the halls were bright and filled with posters of past concerts and smiling students. They walked to the office where the director had asked them to come. A receptionist greeted them kindly and led them to a small waiting area. After a few minutes, the director stepped out of his office. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." Eli and his mother replied. "Come in," he said. They followed him into the office. The walls were filled with photos of past performances. A large piano model sat on his desk. The director sat down and folded his hands. "Eli, today we'll talk about your schedule, your classes, and what the scholarship covers." Eli nodded nervously. The director smiled slightly. "Don't worry. You're not alone in this. We'll guide you every step of the way." Eli felt his shoulders relax a little. The director looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "I know yesterday was overwhelming, but I want you to understand something important. What you did wasn't luck. It was heart. And that is something we can help you shape into something even more beautiful." Eli listened carefully, absorbing every word. "And remember," the director added, "this is only the beginning." Eli took a deep breath. For the first time, he truly believed it. A new chapter was waiting, one filled with challenges, new people, and more music than he had ever dreamed. But he wasn't afraid. He was ready. And everything that came next would shape the rest of his journey in ways he could not yet imagine. Eli stepped out of the director's office with his mother beside him, feeling both excited and uncertain. The hallway was wide and bright, and sounds of music drifted from different practice rooms, violins warming up, someone singing scales, a trumpet echoing faintly from far down the hall. It was a world he had never been part of before, and it felt bigger than anything he had imagined. His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We'll take it slow," she whispered. "One thing at a time." Eli nodded, though his heart was pounding. He didn't want to show how nervous he was. He didn't want to disappoint anyone, not the director, not his mother, and not himself. He looked around at the polished floors, the framed photos of past students, and the doors labeled with names of teachers he had only ever heard stories about. "Ah!" Receptionist approached them with a warm smile. She handed Eli a folder filled with papers. "These are your class details, your schedule, and your student badge. You'll meet your main instructor soon." "Thank you," Eli said, holding the folder tightly. "And don't worry," she added kindly. "Everyone feels nervous on their first day." His mother gave him an encouraging nod. "See? You're not alone." They walked to a small waiting area near the practice rooms. There were a few other students there, some chatting quietly, others tuning instruments. One girl sitting alone with headphones on as she tapped her fingers on her knee in a rhythm only she knew. Eli sat beside his mother, clutching the folder in his lap. He opened it slowly. Inside were several pages, a welcome letter, a map of the academy, a list of school guidelines, and his weekly schedule. It showed piano classes, music theory, ear training, and a workshop class he didn't recognize. His mother leaned over to read. "It looks full," she whispered. "Very full," he said. Before he could worry too much, a tall man with a soft smile and glasses approached them. "You must be Eli," the man said. Eli stood up quickly. "Yes, I'm your instructor," the man said. "You can call me Mr. Hall." Eli nodded shyly. His mother shook the instructor's hand. Thank you for taking him under your guidance. It's an honor, Mr. Hall replied sincerely. I heard about his audition. It seems we have a rare talent joining us. Eli's cheeks warmed, and he lowered his gaze. Compliments still felt strange to him. Mr. Hall adjusted his glasses and gestured for Eli to follow him. Let's take a walk. I want to show you the studio where we'll be working. Eli looked at his mother. She gave him a reassuring smile. Go on. I'll wait right here. He nodded and followed Mr. Hall down the hall. They passed several practice rooms, each filled with a different sound. Eli could hear piano notes, some graceful and smooth, others loud and powerful. It reminded him of how far he had to go. So, Mr. Hall said as they walked, how long have you been playing? A few years, Eli answered quietly. And mostly by ear, I heard? Yes, that's impressive. Not many students can do that. Eli shrugged slightly. I just play what feels right. Mr. Hall smiled. That's a good way to start. Feeling the music is important. Later, we'll build the technique and structure around that. You already have the heart, which is the hardest part to teach. They reached a room at the end of the hallway. Inside, sunlight poured through a large window. The wooden floors gleamed, and in the center sat a grand piano not as large as the one from his audition, but still beautiful. This, Mr. Hall said, is where you'll spend a lot of time. Eli stepped inside slowly. The room felt peaceful, almost sacred. He ran his fingers across the smooth surface of the piano lid. Would you like to play something? Mr. Hall asked. Eli hesitated. Right now? If you'd like. No pressure. Eli took a deep breath and sat on the bench. He positioned his hands on the keys. The silence was heavy, but comforting. Then he began to play a soft melody, something he had created in his mind the night before when he couldn't sleep. The notes flowed naturally, rising and falling like waves. Mr. Hall listened carefully, not moving until Eli finished. When the last note faded, the instructor smiled. You have a gift, he said quietly. A real one. Eli wasn't sure what to say, but Mr. Hall added gently, you also have a lot to learn. And that's a good thing. Music is a journey, not a destination. We'll work together, step by step. Eli nodded. Okay, for today, Mr. Hall continued, I want you to get used to the environment. Explore the building, meet some of the students, and take in the atmosphere. Tomorrow, your real schedule will begin. Eli felt relieved. He wasn't sure he was ready for a full day of classes yet. When they returned to the waiting area, his mother stood up, her face filled with hope. How was it? She asked. It was good, he said with a shy smile. Mr. Hall seems nice. His mother exhaled in relief. Mr. Hall shook her hand again. Your son is remarkable. He's going to do well here. Eli's mother's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you. After leaving the academy, they walked together to the bus stop. The sky was cloudy, but the day felt bright in its own quiet way. Are you feeling okay? His mother asked. Eli nodded. I think I am. You're brave, she said softly. Even when you're scared. He didn't respond, but her words stayed with him. When they reached home, Eli placed the academy folder carefully on the table. He sat down and opened it again, reading every word. His mother watched him from the kitchen as she warmed up some leftover soup. You should rest, she told him. I will, he replied. Though he couldn't bring himself to stop reading. After dinner, he sat at his old keyboard again. The keys felt different now. They were familiar, but he was more aware of how much they lacked compared to the grand piano. Still, he played anyway. The simple sound felt like a reminder of where he had started. His mother listened quietly as she folded laundry. When the melody drifted through the room, she paused and sighed softly. "You sound better every day," she said. Eli shook his head. "I still have so much to learn." "That's what makes it exciting," she replied. Later that night, he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. He thought about Mr. Holloway, about the other students, about the scholarship, and about everything he would have to face in the days ahead. But he also felt something new, a small spark of confidence. Maybe he didn't fully believe he belonged there yet, but he wanted to try. And that was enough. The next morning came quickly. Eli packed his small backpack with the notebook and pencil the academy had given him. He put on the cleanest shirt he owned and looked at himself in the mirror. His hair was a little messy, and he looked younger than he felt, but he straightened his posture anyway. His mother hurried around the room, making sure he had everything he needed. "Don't forget your badge," she reminded him. He clipped it onto his shirt. "You look great," she said proudly. "Nervous," he admitted. "It means you care," she replied. They walked to the bus stop again, and this time Eli didn't hold his mother's hand. He still felt scared, but he also felt ready. When they arrived at the academy, the halls were filled with students rushing to their classes. Eli took a deep breath. "Do you want me to walk with you?" his mother asked. He shook his head. "I can do it." She smiled a smile full of love, worry, and pride. "I'll be right outside when school ends." Eli nodded and stepped into the hallway alone. The noise of instruments and students surrounded him, but he kept moving, following the map in his folder. He found his classroom and walked in. A few students were already there. Some looked confident, others anxious. A couple of them looked up when he entered. One boy gave him a small nod. "Hey," the boy said. "Hi," Eli replied. He sat down and opened his notebook. His hands were shaking, but he tried to steady them. When Mr. Holloway walked into the room, the chatter quieted. The instructor placed his bag on the desk and smiled at the class. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "Welcome to your first day. I'm glad you're here. Each one of you has something special to offer. And together, we're going to make music that means something." Eli listened closely, trying to absorb every word. "Let's begin," Mr. Holloway said. And as the lesson started, something shifted inside Eli. He wasn't just scared anymore. He was excited. This was the beginning of something much bigger than he had expected. And deep down, he knew he wasn't going to turn back now. Eli woke up before the sun had fully risen. His room was quiet, and the soft light slowly pushed through the thin curtains. Today felt different. He couldn't explain why, but something inside him knew this day would shape everything that came next. Maybe it was because he had been at the academy for a few weeks now. Maybe it was because he felt changes inside himself that he had never felt before. Or maybe it was because he finally believed, even if just a little, that he belonged there. He sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. The floor beneath his feet felt cold but familiar. He could hear his mother in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The smell of warm bread drifted through the air. He put on his clothes, a simple shirt and pants, nothing fancy, and stepped out of his room. His mother looked over her shoulder and smiled. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle. "Morning," Eli replied. She placed a plate in front of him. "You have a long day today. Mr. Holloway said there will be a small performance at the academy. Are you nervous?" Eli nodded. "A little." "You'll do amazing," she said. "Just like you always do." He wasn't sure about always. Some days he made mistakes at the piano. Some days he doubted himself so much he felt frozen. But he appreciated her faith in him. After breakfast, they walked to the bus stop. The morning breeze was cool and refreshing. Eli held his backpack strapped tightly while his mother walked beside him with quiet pride. When they reached the academy, students were scattered across the lawn and hallways. Some carried violin cases, others held music sheets, and some were practicing outside, their notes drifting into the open air. "Do you want me to come to the performance later?" his mother asked. Eli nodded. "Yes, please." She squeezed his hand. "Then I'll be there." He took a deep breath and walked into the building. The halls were bright, and the familiar hum of music wrapped around him like a warm blanket. His first class was theory. He sat next to a quiet boy who often sketched music notes in the margins of his notebook. The teacher explained different chord structures, and even though it was difficult, Eli listened carefully. He wanted to understand everything, even the parts that seemed confusing. After theory came his piano session with Mr. Hall. Eli walked into the studio, feeling the same mix of excitement and nerves he always felt. "Good morning," Mr. Hall said. "Ready for today?" "I think so," Eli replied. "You'll be performing for a small group later," the instructor reminded him. "Nothing huge, just a few teachers and students. But it's a good chance to practice playing in front of others." Eli nodded slowly. "I'm a little scared." "That's normal," Mr. Hall said. "Every musician feels that way. Fear doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it matters to you." Those words eased Eli's chest a little. "Let's warm up," the instructor said. Eli sat at the piano and placed his fingers gently on the keys. He played a few scales, focusing on keeping his hands relaxed. Then he shifted into the piece he had been practicing all week, a soft, flowing melody that reminded him of a quiet river. "Good," Mr. Hall said softly. "But don't rush the ending. Let it breathe." Eli played it again, slower this time. The last notes lingered in the air, giving the melody space to settle. "That's it," Mr. Hall said. An hour later, class ended. Eli walked through the hallway, feeling a spark of confidence he hadn't felt before. He knew he wasn't perfect. He knew he had a long road ahead. But he also knew he was growing. As the afternoon approached, chairs were arranged in a small performance room. The lights were soft, and sunlight streamed through the tall windows. A few teachers gathered in the back. Some parents sat in the chairs, chatting quietly. Students stood nervously around the room. Eli searched for his mother and spotted her near the doorway. She waved with a big smile. He felt his heart settle a little. Mr. Hall walked over to him. "You're up third," he said. Eli nodded, trying to keep his breathing steady. The first performer was a girl with a violin. She played beautifully fast, clear, and full of emotion. People clapped when she finished. The second performer was a boy who played a trumpet piece. His notes were strong and confident. Eli admired how fearless he looked. Then it was Eli's turn. His legs felt weak as he stood, but he walked slowly toward the piano anyway. The room felt large, the air heavy. He could hear his own heartbeat. He sat on the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed his hands on the keys. The room went quiet. He took one long breath. Then he began to play. At first, he was nervous. His hands trembled slightly. But as the music filled the room, something shifted. The nerves softened. His fingers loosened. The melody flowed naturally, guiding him forward. He closed his eyes for a moment as he played, letting the emotions take shape in the sound. He didn't think about the people watching him. He didn't think about the mistakes he might make. He just thought about the music. When the final notes faded, the room went still. Then a gentle wave of applause rose from the chairs. Eli looked up slowly. His mother was standing, clapping with pride shining in her eyes. A few teachers nodded with approval. Mr. Hall gave him a small, warm smile. Eli exhaled. He stood, gave a shy bow, and walked back to his spot. His heart was racing, but in a good way. As the next performer prepared their instrument, Eli felt something he had never felt before, a quiet confidence blooming inside him. steady and warm. When the event ended, people stood and gathered their things. His mother hurried to him. "You were wonderful," she said, her voice full of emotion. Eli blushed. "I